I start first? Can I
Sure. Mine hasn't even loaded yet, so
like lesson? One thing is it's a little bit hard for me to hear clearly the background sound they're discussing, and so um, so I watched it like 3 times. I hope I got it.
yes, you were right. They were mostly looking for slang or British.
Yeah, okay. So I think your objectives are very clear, and they're smart objectives. They are specific and measurable and attainable, and also time bound. And
Okay.
I think the activities you ask students to are also the objectives oriented. It's very clear. So I think everything the students are doing is focused on the objectives. Another thing I think is really good is your class is student centered. The students are
Okay.
learning those new concepts through the activities. And most of the time, I know you are just giving the guidance to the individuals who need it. And uh, only the like common problems, and you think you need to address it. So you got a student whole class attention to give the further instruction. So I think it's really student-centered class. Um, the there's only one thing I can think of give suggestion is there are some students I think they're not very engaged in the class. Well, I didn't see the whole class, so I don't know. It's from the part I saw. So
Right.
I don't know if they are doing their activity, or they have problems, or they are lost. They're lost. So so I think I might suggest changing their seat to close to you or the board, or you can ask question
Hmm.
and pick them to answer, or just go their table to check. Um, and another thing is, there was one time you tried to got the whole class attention, but still some students, I think they are still talking or doing their work. So I think for this age students, I think it's hard to control them. So one thing I can think of is maybe you can use the token economy system. So maybe that thing can motivate students to pay attention to their classroom behavior.
Hmm.
That's all I can think of.
Okay. Well, I thought that it was so badly recorded that it was hard to see the objective on the board, hard to see the whole class. But
Yeah,
actually, the one corner that you couldn't really see were three pretty high achievers, which is why they weren't asking me any questions. But right in the center, there was one boy who just looked like he was looking in the book, which
oh,
was him trying to hide because he just entered the class and he's got a really low level of English. So he
okay.
was trying to hide during the activity, I could tell. But he understood what was going on, but he couldn't really help his group too much because he's on chapter 4 of the book and the rest of the class is almost finished. So
Oh,
he's a little behind just because he got here late, but he's coming for extra English support and things like that. But I could tell that one of the problems I had was getting to everybody's questions because some questions were my least favorite question is this right? and, and I was instead of them going to the criteria for what's British and what's slang, they wanted me just to say yes, yes, that's good. So
oh,
like I tried to avoid that as much as I could, but they're really a well-behaved class. They're a little bit chatty, but that's excellent for a class in South America. That's really well behaved.
yeah, yeah. I understand. That's very different culture.
So let me tell you what I see in yours
Okay.
because they said we need 5 minutes recorded.
Yes. Okay.
So I'll figure out how we save it or how we access it, but if it's recorded, at least it's in Zoom somewhere. So
Okay.
I'm gonna look at my the form I filled in. The the objectives I thought were perfect. They were clear. And basically they were stated in the PowerPoint, which means very visual for anybody in the class. The whole class could see them, even though it wasn't a big class. But I think that was perfect, especially for younger students, that it's visible to everyone. Even if they can't read it, you have an opportunity to read to them. Let's see. I thought this was interesting because the beginning I was thinking, oh, this is teacher-centered, this is teacher-centered. And then I remembered that you were doing the I do, you do, we do, right?
Yes.
So what happened was it went from teacher-centered to completely student-centered by the end. So I think that's a nice way to do it, especially because you can't just start a class with little guys and it's all student-centered, because they need guidance right away. So I think you went from teacher-centered all the way to student is left completely independent, and she was doing a good job with the last story. So I think that was a good choice.
Thank you.
Let's see what else. As far as the thinking skills question, I think all three: remembering, comprehending, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluated. I put in the form at least two verbs from each one of those categories. So it actually looked like you were trying to get all those thinking skills in, and they did. So I think they were pretty good. As far as engagement, the whole class was engaged.
I hope so.
Well, I think it was pretty hard not to have the one student engaged, but it did actually pick up. The more independence you gave her, the more engaged she was. It seemed to me that every time she was given something a little bit more that's just for you to do, she could handle it. Then a little bit more, so that by the end she could handle a story on her own. Physical space of the class, I don't think you could do much better than that, because it was kind of comfortable and easy for both teacher and student to concentrate. And as far as formative, I think if there was anything that I would change,
okay,
I think I would give her even more questions, like maybe clue questions. If you're going to ask her, what's the conflict, what's the problem in the story, maybe a question before that would lead her to it. Okay. Do you see a problem coming? You know, what do you think is going to happen? Something like that, that could help her when she gets to the tough question, like what's the problem, that she could probably answer it. That's the only thing I would change, is maybe even more questions.
Okay, more questions.